Hello and welcome to the Agtually podcast, where we learn about farming and food from the people who actually grow and process it. I'm your host, Sheridan. Join me as I learn as much as I possibly can about agriculture and food production. Thank you so much for being here. Today, Wyatt Ross from Windmill Mountain Ranch has agreed to sit down with me, and it was on really short notice, which I appreciate. He's going to talk to me a little bit about meat production and quality assurance, and how, as the middleman, he can ensure the safety of the product for the customers. His situation is not unique. A lot of farmers and ranchers actually sell directly to the customer. And so before I get into my questions, will you please, well, first of all, thank you for sitting down with me.
Of course.
And will you please give me a little bit of background about how your family is involved in the food production side of agriculture, like specifically like meat and milk?
Yeah. Windmill Mountain Ranch started, I guess my great-grandpa bought it back in the 70s, and it's just been in our family. My dad he worked there for a long time. It's just, real family operation up there, and we really want the quality of our beef to kind of shine through like in every part of what we do, and usually we just sell it on and like it goes into like the system, the evil system, which
Yeah.
I'm totally joking by saying that, but we don't know where our beef goes. And so this, like, what spawned Windmill Mountain Ranch, at least the online portion of it, was the just to get into like more in front of the consumer, like actually get to the end, because it is so rewarding to see like the end consumer like, oh man, I loved your steaks, like, send me a picture of like the T-bone that somebody grilled up, and it's just like, it looks amazing, and it's like, yeah, it's pretty rewarding when it comes to that. But we also along with that, we also have the dairy, and the dairy has been a huge part of the operation because that has allowed us to feed out our cattle, whereas like a lot of cow-calf operations, they can't, and because of Forest Service lease that that they can't feed out their animals there to like whatever, but with the dairy we can feed out our animals a very specific diet, and it makes for amazing tasting beef, very high quality, in my opinion, some of the best you can get in the world. It is great, and I imagine you could speak to it. It's great beef.
Yes.
And it's hard to explain the difference between just like grocery store beef and our beef. It's just like two different worlds.
For sure. Growing up, we would eat our own cows, basically. Growing up on a dairy, the cull cows, we would eat those. And frying up the ground beef, it was normal to fry up the ground beef. And then I went to college and I started buying my own ground beef from the store. And when I fried it up, I was like, what is this? This is so weird, because it's just the texture, the consistency, the amount of fat in it. It's just completely different to get it straight from the farm, rather than through the grocery store.
Yeah, it's insane. The amount of different animals in 1 pound of ground beef of store-bought is well over 1,000 different DNA strands. So it's everything from that to how, like, I imagine your family aged it as well. The aging process takes a lot of the moisture out that people complain about with ground beef. And not to say that the meat's dry, but it's like when you are, pan frying a burger or something like that, there's a lot of water that comes out when you're at store bought versus our beef. It's a very minimal amount of water that comes out. So, but yeah, it's insane. I had a customer who he called me, apparently right after his wife, without him knowing, he like went to the store and bought just ground beef. And apparently right when he walked in the door, he could smell that it wasn't our beef.
Oh, wow. And
so it's like, it's everything. And to people that haven't tried it, I really recommend that you try just any aged beef at all. Like, it's a whole different world, to be honest with you. So,
and when you talk about aged, what does that mean?
So it's also called hang. It's when after the animal is harvested and put into a carcass, the carcass format, I guess, for lack of a better term, it sits there and is actually aged, and it sits into a cooler that's above freezing temperature, not above 40 though, and it ages the meat and it breaks down the amino acids in it, makes it a little bit more tender, and also adds a little bit of a nutty flavor, and it shrinks the overall weight of the carcass because all the water is coming off of it. That's in all the cells of the animal. So it really, like, you have more beef flavor, you have a frankly different beef flavor, and it just tastes better.
Okay. All right, interesting.
Yeah.
So the meat that you sell, does it come from the ranch or the dairy or both?
So it comes from both. Mainly it comes from the ranch. but every animal does go through the dairy at some point. And I like to explain it as a feedlot because that's essentially what it is. It's still the exact same process that goes through like the traditional beef. If you were just to buy from a grocery store, it's much the same lifespan. However, it's just we get to control every aspect of it. So we're actually controlling making the best meat possible. That's what that is our goal from when they're born on the ranch to when they're harvested at the slaughter plant. So
right.
Yeah.
So the you talked about controlling their feed as well. Some people swear that grass-fed is the best. If you're controlling their feed, you're probably not feeding just grass. So yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, what's the difference, and what are your thoughts on grass-fed versus like creating their own ration?
Yeah. So I love grass-fed beef. I don't particularly like the taste. I really appreciate people going out and looking for grass-fed beef because it shows that people like want to know where their beef's coming from. Mm-hmm. They want to know what it's fed. Mm-hmm. I think it's a great thing. Do I believe in the health benefits? I mean, there is more omega-3s in grass-fed beef than corn-fed beef, but I think beef is a superfood no matter what. Mm-hmm. So either way, love it, and in this more controlled environment, we could feed grass, but corn just makes everything taste so much better. And what we do feed is mostly grass anyway. It's just the corn kernels that are actually which only makes up about 10% of their overall ration. The rest is alfalfa hay that you would feed your horses, mm-hmm. and it's really simple ingredients. It's not like a lot of people think it's like just a corn milkshake slop that they throw on the ground, and it's definitely not that. So, yeah, I love the grass-fed community, but we do supply corn-fed just because in all honesty, it tastes better. So.
Okay. So why does it make it taste better? Do you know why?
So I don't know the process that makes it happen, but I know that the fat actually tastes different, and to our palate nowadays, corn fat tastes cleaner, and it gives an overall like a whiter fat versus a more yellowy fat on grass-fed, and that grass-fed tastes. People say it's gamey, but I would say it's more just like grassy flavor versus corn. It's just a very clean tasting. Like it doesn't take away or add anything to the actual beef meat flavor. So I think that's why people like corn-fed beef in mass as compared to grass-fed.
Okay, and like you had said before, it's not only corn, right? Yeah, corn's just a small percentage.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we've talked about this quite a bit in previous episodes about milk, but can you talk a little bit about antibiotic use? Do your cows? They're not organic. It's not an organic farm, right?
No.
So do they get antibiotics?
Only if they get sick. So okay. They do have a certain shots that they get that aren't antibiotic, but it's only if they get sick. It's much like how if your child were to get sick, you want to put them on antibiotics for a little bit just to figure out whatever's going on. Mm-hmm. That's similar to what we do, but we do not add antibiotics as a growth hormone, sort of how a few, very rarely farms do this, but some farms do it. So, yeah, we don't do anything like that with antibiotics.
Okay. All right. What are the quality assurance steps that you take to ensure that your customers are getting a good product? I mean, you've talked about controlling their feed and monitoring the cows from birth until they're harvested, but what are some other steps? I think one time I was working here in the office and an inspector came by to look at some cattle. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think the first step of that would be what we do, and like it's Ethan who's responsible for the beefs up north, and it's him and his family that are up there. I can name everybody who's doing that. I monitor them here, and also all the guys around here monitor them that I can also name by name. And I know the guy who butchers the beef personally. Like he went to high school with my dad. Like I've known him forever. Mm-hmm. I know that I'm getting a good product from him, and he's invited me to slaughter with him multiple times, and I've taken him up a few times, and I've seen the process happen, and I've seen how it happens, and I also deliver it to the customer. So it's me and everything. I'm the quality assurance on this end, but more on the governmental side of things. There's inspectors that come in, brand inspectors, every single time a quarter, halves, or whole is bought, or honestly even any beef is bought. It has to go through an inspection while it's still alive at the farm, and the brand inspector will come out, check for anything from abscesses to see if they're sick or not, to see what kind of quality animal they are. and it's that's a step to make it as clean as possible from when they're still alive, and then once they're actually harvested, there is at my custom cut side, there's a USDA inspector at the plant on slaughter and while they're cutting up the beef. So it's like it's constantly inspected on that end, and then once it's sealed, it's stamped, and then that package can't be opened unless it's by the customer. Okay. So there is a whole plethora of steps that are taken to ensure quality beef, and it's amazing the hoops that we have to jump through sometimes, but we would rather jump through hoops and not have anything, because who knows what, if you didn't have somebody like our family behind your beef, then I could very easily see how people could take advantage of a system like that. So, but fortunately, we know the brand inspectors as well, and it's a pretty cool little ecosystem for beef. So to get eventually to your guys' plate.
Is there any reason why a cow wouldn't pass inspection, or for some reason they wouldn't go into the meat supply? Yeah,
so it's really anything like an abscess, if they're sick, if they are have any injuries. It basically has to be a perfectly healthy cow before it goes into the slaughter facility. And once they're in the slaughter facility, they can't have anything wrong with them in that process from the shipping to the actual facility. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the inspector will refuse the beef to be slaughtered. And it's very stringent on that side. And then even after their slaughter, they check their internal organs for different like tuberculosis in their lungs, all sorts of different diseases that they take. They'll randomly inspect they'll take randomly inspected samples of livers, they'll take randomly inspected of everything, and just see what this animal, if anything's wrong with it. And if something's wrong with it, that animal is marked in a system that like, hey, we got to hold that beef back. Okay. And it's marked, and that's it. So it's very stringent on how we sell meat, and there's a lot of steps taken. So. Mm-hmm.
And is that the case for the majority of beef production?
Yeah. So anything by the USDA or even the AZDA, they all go through the same steps as we take. But the only steps that we take differently than like a standard like beef that you just get from a grocery store is that you can call everybody that's a part of this. Like I can, like, if there's an issue with your beef, which there isn't ever, because I also inspect the meat before it goes out. Even if there was something that wasn't up to snuff, I could call the guy who would be responsible. Mm-hmm. I know exactly where it's coming from. I know every single beef that comes on there has a number. I can look back at that cow's history and see what happened. Okay. If there was anything that happened. But even before that, like, it couldn't get to that point because there's just so many steps taken on our end to make sure that nothing like that would ever happen. Okay. So, and another thing too is that, we only sell about 50 to 100 beefs a year out of our dairy, which, a lot of it still goes to standard meat production. I get to select the best ones out of that. So it's really easy to, especially the quality of feedlot / dairy that we have here, it's really easy to select the best ones. There's a lack of cows to pick that had anything wrong with them. So yeah.
Okay. How do you pick a butcher? So I know you mentioned that you personally know the butcher that you're working with, but if you didn't know him, what are some things that you would look for?
Look for in a butcher. I think the biggest thing about butchers in particular that sometimes they get a bad rap for, at least in the beef share side, is that, am I getting my meat back? Because you're not, like, you're really, unless you're, personally involved with the butcher, then you can't really view that happening and like be there for the 2 weeks that it has to hang before it actually gets cut, and making sure your beef goes through. There hasn't really been any, and there's laws against it, that you have to get your own beef back. But I think honesty would be the number one thing in a butcher. But just actually finding their location, there's a very lack of butchers in Arizona / the United States in general. If you really wanted to make something yourself and you didn't really know what to do, I would open a harvesting facility. Really? Because there's an extreme lack, and there's a lot of government grants, and there's a lot of things that people can help you out with. Last year it was a $56 billion industry, like just in that side. It's a massive industry that has a massive deficit of labor and a massive deficit of brains, to be honest with you. So,
why do you think that is?
It's hard work. I remember going into some of the harvesting. I can't remember exactly what the class was called, but it was with Dwayne Wolf, which he's a great professor at U of A. He taught the class, and we went through the whole process of butchering just three animals. And to give you reference, the plant that we were going through, that plant can technically handle they can handle 20 beefs a day. And we only did as a class 9, and there was 10 people helping. So it was, and with 3 students, and so there was a lot of people in there. Mm-hmm. And it took us the entire week to process 9 beefs.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's incredibly hard. Those guys work harder than, I would say, almost anyone in the ag industry. And they don't get enough credit, to be honest with you. They don't get enough credit. It's hard work. It's dirty work, you know. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you're supplying people with food, like an actual food product. Mm-hmm. You go from like a live animal that's in a field into like a steakhouse, you know, like it's like, it's incredible what those guys do. So, but doesn't have the grandeur as like a cowboy, you know, I want to grow up and be a cowboy sort of thing, you know, and it's like, nobody really says I want to grow up and be a butcher, unfortunately, but we hope to change that a little bit because they're needed. They're needed a lot.
Yes. So why is it, do you think, that more people don't get their meat directly from the farmer or the rancher? Do they just not know that that's an option, or is it maybe because a lot of farmers or ranchers sell like a certain amount and they like don't have the space for it, or the upfront cost is too much? What are your thoughts?
I think for just on the consumer end, it's like you're already at Bash's anyway. Mm-hmm. Like you might as well just pick up their $1.99 ground beef they have on sale. Mm-hmm. You know, it's really, you kind of have to go out of your way to go get a whole beef. Once you get that whole beef, then it's done for the year. So I think for a lot of people, it's how their parents bought beef, you know, but it's not how their great-grandparents or their grandparents bought beef. Mm-hmm. So it's really getting back to that, like, locality of food is, I think, huge. But,
okay. Yeah. All right. I don't think I have. Oh, I do have one question. Okay. So what's your turnaround time? Like, do you wait until you receive a certain amount of orders and then you send animals in, or do you send animals into the butcher and then just expect that your orders are going to come?
Yeah. So we have 2 different sides, and one is a USDA inspected facility that we send beefs down just when I start running low on my supply of individual cuts, and that's something that you could buy. We have a couple grocery stores that we have on right now, Inspire Farms in Mesa. They're really great. But that's one side of it, and that's just, you could order from me tomorrow and it'll get to you by Wednesday of next week, because it will only ship on Mondays. Okay. Just to guarantee that it doesn't get caught up in any delivery issues or anything like that over the weekend. But on the whole quarters and halves, that is usually done quarterly. It just depends on how many orders I get in. Last month we hauled 20 in on our summer harvesting, so there's room to go around for a lot of that stuff. So I think next slaughter date is for either October or September. So that's about the turnaround time. And if I get more orders in 1 month, I'll send them in. So luckily the relationship I have with my butchers are very much like, hey, I got a bunch of orders. Like, do you have any spots? Like, let's go, you know. So, that's about what we do.
All right, that makes sense. Do you have anything else that you would like customers to know, or anything else that you want to talk about with beef production?
I think that the biggest thing that I want folks to take out of what we're doing is that the food system right now, a lot of people seem to be upset with it. I think it's just that there's a loud population of people who are upset with what they're seeing, how animals are treated, and what goes on. But I invite them to see like how we do things, and go on our website at windmillmountainranch.com and see like why our beef is better, and that how we're not necessarily anything new. We're actually really old, and that we've been around, we've been doing this for a long time, and that there's people like us that are doing it all around all around the country, that people are going out and finding their beef locally. I think that's not only gratifying for the actual beef producer, but it's also gratifying for the customer to know exactly where their beef comes from, because we're not afraid of anything that we do, and any question that you guys can ask us, and heck, come out, like you wouldn't get that offer from Tyson, you wouldn't get that offer from National, you wouldn't get that offer from any of the big producers. And on that, 85% of the beef processing is 85% of the beef processing capacity is owned by 4 companies. So that almost all of them have regional restrictions between regional deals with each other, that they can't, JBS is here, National might be somewhere else, Tyson might be somewhere else. And it went from, back in the 70s where guys were driving and showing up at feedlots to buy beef from those large packers, to nobody. They're sending us a price and this is what we get. So you're really not only helping us a lot, but you're helping those guys realize that, like, hey, beef like this we can sell it. And I think that gives us, as a beef producers, gives us a lot more bargaining power.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Yeah, of course.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah.